Welcome to DABCC Radio,
where smart people listen.
Virtualization and Cloud Talk.
Featuring cutting-edge solutions from the hottest companies around the globe.
Broadcasting from the DABCC offices in sunny Sarasota, Florida.
Surrounded by computers, books, and Legos.
A Microsoft MVP, Citrix Charter CTP, VMware vExpert.
And your host, Douglas Brown.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of DABCC Radio. My name is Doug Brown, and I'm your host for today, and we have a great show for you today. We have Samsung on the line, and particularly a gentleman named Greg Spence, who's responsible for, he's a lot of different things over there. One of the things is the all-in-one device that they work with in conjunction with IGEL. So I was introduced to Greg through that and really hit it off. Great guy, really smart guy, and he loves computers as much as we do and has been in this space for a long time and in the thin client world for a long time, dating back to the 90s when I started, and a lot of you guys did too. So really great guy, and I've been looking forward to this. I won't go into what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about so many different things, but also we're going to talk about their DeX, which I think is really cool. The future of thin clients and of mobile computing as we know it, as within the Citrix, Microsoft, end user computing world. And well, I'm rambling at this point. I'm so excited to share this with you because I had such a great time recording it. So with no further ado, here's my interview with Greg Spence from Samsung. Okay, Greg, thanks so much for taking the time to do this with me. I look forward to this conversation. We've chatted for, a while, an hour or more. So I guess it's time to press play or record and start chatting about the podcast, right?
Sure.
So I don't know if it'll be as much fun. Well, it'll definitely be as much fun because now we get to chat technology. So, okay. So as always, for those who might not know who you are, can you tell us who is Greg Spence and what do you do over at Samsung?
Sure. My name is Greg Spence, and I'm the Senior Product and Business Development Manager for all things cloud at Samsung of America. I've been in the thin client industry since 1998 with companies like NeoWare. NeoWare had an alliance with IBM as well. And then spent about 5 years at HP, and I've been at Samsung for about 5 years now.
Very cool, very cool. So, and you mentioned NeoWare, and you've been doing thin clients since, the beginning of thin clients almost, right?
Almost, yeah, just about.
That's great. That's great. I've been a fan of thin clients since back then too. I come from the mainframe world, right? We've talked about this many times, and the listeners, I guess they've probably heard this many times too. So to me, it just makes a lot of sense to have. I don't like the word thin client though. I like to call them secure access points or secure endpoints. I think thin clients sometimes have a negative connotation where someone might say, I tried that once and it was slow and chunky. Well, that was the 90s. Not try them again today. It's anything but. So, and it's the operating system built for remoting is what I like to think of them as. But anyway.
Yeah, I like to think of them as an access appliance because a thin client, the way people should think about them is much like a telephone. It's a device that gives you access to all of your resources that might be sitting on a server. And it doesn't really matter where that server is.
Yeah. Well, I forgot, man. You have these great sayings for all these. Oh, I'm looking forward to this. I was looking forward to begin with, but I forgot that you have all these great. Yes, I like that. What did you call it again? An access appliance?
Yes, access appliance.
I like that. But it makes me think of the Citrix days when they had that big red access button. Remember that?
Yes.
Big red. They gave us these T-shirts once. They were big and it had this giant embroidered patch thing on this at access, the access button. But
I remember them.
The button was the patch was like 8 or 12 inches in size. So when you bent over, because it was a patch, it didn't bend, right? So it just sort of it was not a very comfortable shirt. It wasn't thought through, The engineers didn't have anything to say about it. But Yeah, access appliance. I like that. So Samsung's a big company, and when someone thinks about Samsung, they think about, maybe even probably phones, right, nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
But can you tell us about Samsung in your world? What does it? What do you guys within your department, your area? What are you trying to accomplish? What are you doing?
So my department, report into the visual display division, which covers digital signage, large format displays, as well as business monitors, and also thin clients and zero clients.
So, given that you've been in the access access appliance thin client space for quite some time, what role do you think thin clients play in the IT world today? Where do you see the value, compared to what we originally started with? Is it the same value? Is new value? Is it where do they fit today, Greg?
Well, I think anywhere where you have a PC, a thin client can fit as long as you're using some type of cloud infrastructure. So as the cloud infrastructure and that whole industry continues to grow and blossom, then I think people can start to think about their PCs, especially their stationary PCs. They can start thinking about a thin client or a zero client as being a much more secure alternative to a PC, and something that's a lot easier to manage as well, because it's a very small footprint software stack that's now sitting on the desktop. It's a locked file system, so nothing can be written. There's no unauthorized writes going to that flash, and it's just a much more secure, and it's a way to simplify the desktop. And where you don't have to manage this huge software stack that's sitting on each and every endpoint. So I think it's most applicable in business. We find that some of the top verticals are healthcare, higher education, and government, because obviously government and defense contractors and defense agencies, they, of course, are most interested in security. And just in general, everyone likes a device that simplifies their world. So the IT administrators are always looking for ways to minimize all of the attack surfaces in their environment. And a thin client or zero client is a great way to do that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that, traditional PCs, their legacy, right? It comes from the original personal computer, which was a one-to-one relationship. I had a computer and I did my work on that computer, and it wasn't even networked, right?
Right.
And so the PCs it's a one-to-one relationship, and that world is I won't say non-existent. That world is a long time ago. And today's world is multi-tiered, and like you mentioned, the cloud, there's so much that's being distributed and delivered via the cloud today. All these SaaS apps. I mean, my two biggest apps that I use is my browser and my is Outlook, right? My mail client and my portal into the internet. And do I need a big, giant, expensive, hard to manage, a hard to secure endpoint if those are my two most important components? Absolutely not, right? It's sort of counterproductive. It's counterintuitive, but it's legacy. It's what we came from, and trying to get rid of that seems sort of like, hey, you're taking something away from me. I want this personal experience. But in today's world, we can give you a personal experience, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where I see the role of thin clients. Now, there are people, of course, that where a Windows device or a Mac device is more than adequate or more than required, right?
Sure.
But I think those is fewer and fewer. Each and every day is fewer and fewer. And if you're in a remoting environment, Citrix, VMware, Microsoft, VDI, DAS, what have you, that fits very well with cloud, where the server-based computing, the VDI, is the bridge from legacy to the web. In the SaaS apps and in the web apps, in the websites and what have you, are the future. And you put that in one interface, it's secure to manage, secure to easy to deploy, and then you have a modern operating system. And when you hear Microsoft talk about OSs, they're really going in that direction. I think that's the modern operating system, right?
Well, yeah, we should talk about that because I think that's an important thing to cover is all of these new services that are available, software as a service, application as a service, desktop as a service. That's the most interesting change I think that's been happening in the last few years in this space because when I started back in 1998, if the customer didn't have a Citrix environment, my product was of no use to them. Whereas today, they might not have that cloud environment set up today, but with all of these new services, you can now outsource that infrastructure. I like to call it infrastructure as a service because you're outsourcing that to someone else, which means you can order it much like you order cable TV. So you can have it turned on, have it integrated with your environment, have it up and running in just a few days. Versus in the old days, if you wanted to build a cloud infrastructure, you had to build it from scratch on your own. And it was expensive and it was time consuming. There were lots of benefits to it, but getting there was a long journey. Whereas with all of these new services today, you can get there in just a few days.
Yeah. It's the Google Chromebook. It's why somebody would buy a Google Chromebook, except for we have better management, right? Chromebook is the same. A Chromebook is usable. I always think about, and especially when I first heard about the Chromebook, I was like, really, seriously, you're going to buy a laptop with just a browser? Really, seriously, come on. But there's a lot of use cases for it. The problem is it's a laptop with a browser that's really not managed. So It's distributed computing without the ability to do, a lot of applications, right? So the key there is management. We'll talk about management in a bit. And that's why I think where Samsung and definitely IGEL really shines, right?
Absolutely.
So, as we start looking about these SaaS, talk about SaaS apps and things like this cloud investment, right? What are some of the barriers there? I mean, it's not all rosy, right? What's the, how do we give a good customer experience? What are some of the barriers for moving from local PC to the, the cloud-based model?
Well, I think the biggest barrier is the fact that there's so many choices today. I mean, now, it used to be, Citrix played one of the biggest roles, but now you have VMware is one of the dominant forces in the cloud space. You have Microsoft with Azure. You also have Amazon getting into the ring, and we all know how big and capable that company is. So there's so many choices out there that I think that's where IT buyers tend to struggle a little bit is, okay, where do I start? But there's a ton of system integrators out there that can walk you through it. And with desktop as a service, software as a service, you don't necessarily have to build out the infrastructure all at once. You can start to kind of build it a la carte, where you have you take a certain user population, let's say an inside sales team, and you can purchase a desktop as a service for them, set up their environment, have them up and running quickly, and you don't have to build out any infrastructure. And you also don't have to shell out a lot of money for that infrastructure because you're paying on a monthly basis versus it being a capital expense up front. So you can start small and then work your way up. And then all of these cloud companies like Citrix, VMware, and Amazon, they also have tools that allow you to pull it all together if you have a hybrid environment. So as you build out these cloud infrastructure environments, or I should say these cloud environments, because you don't necessarily have to own the infrastructure anymore, then there's other tools that allow you to gain visibility of all of these assets from one single pane of glass. So my recommendation to most people that want to get into it is, start small, take one user population at a time and get it up and running, get used to it, get familiar with it, and then start building out more environments from there. And while you're doing that, you can then start to think about how you can simplify the desktop. You no longer need that PC, with the i7, processor at every single desktop.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, completely, and especially when you're talking about the processors, the power. It depends upon the use case, and that's what's neat about these devices we have today is where you can have the i7s for the graphically intensive, workloads or what have you. But then for typical task workers, you can do something a lot less. It's going to cost you less, but at the end of the day, you have the same user experience. The same operating system, the same workflow, the same applications, the same access, right? And it just it's at the end in the other pieces, you mentioned this basically the subscription economy that we're very fastly moving into, if not are already here, right? And that completely changes how IT spends money. It makes it somewhat easier for us to spend money too, right?
Yeah, it frees up capital expense in favor of operating expense. So it accelerates the process of moving your infrastructure to the cloud in a big way.
So back to thin clients, what are some of the common use cases you've seen with thin clients?
Well, at Samsung, one of our specialties, and we can talk about this more because this delves into why Samsung and IGEL partnered. But one of our strength areas with thin client is we integrate the thin client intelligence into a business class display. And where we see a lot of common usage is in the healthcare industry, which is probably our top vertical. You'll see these devices being used on mobile carts. And the reason why is because a thin client uses less power than a PC, so you get more battery life. So you can have that cart up and running on a battery for 8 to 12 hours before you need to recharge. And if you have backup batteries, you can go even longer. Whereas with a PC, you might have to plug it in every 2 to 4 hours. So that really limits the PC really limits what you can do with those mobile carts. We also see them used at nursing stations because at nursing stations, one of the things they need is desktop space. So what they tend to do is take our monitors, our thin client monitors, they mount them to a VISA mount on an arm. And that arm allows them to move the monitor out of the way when they have paperwork to do, but then bring it forward when they have to input data. We also see them in interesting trend that I've got to witness firsthand being at Samsung is about 5 years ago, what we found was Samsung was doing very well with all-in-one thin clients in the higher ed space. And that business seemed to dry up for about 2 years. We were losing to ourselves. We were losing to the Samsung Chromebook. But what happened is the industry realized that the Chromebook, while it has its place in the world, it wasn't all things to all people. And they kind of the industry learned their lesson. So in the educational space, they've kind of come back around to using thin clients again. But they parsed it out into different use cases. So for example, they still might give us, if they want to give students a device, and if they have the budget to do that, a Chromebook is still probably their first choice. But in where you need a stationary device, like for example in a lab or in a library or at a customer study kiosk, places like that, they realized that the thin client was the best solution because it was less prone to theft because you don't even really see a device. And even if you do have an external device, it can be hidden. But it's also easier to manage, and there's no attack surface there. So you don't have to worry about students hacking into it, changing the environment, and basically screwing things up. So it's much more tamper-proof than a PC, and but also more robust than a Chromebook in that it's now a managed device, number one, and number two, you're connected to the cloud, so you really only have to worry about the content in the cloud, and you can manage that centrally.
Yeah, completely Exactly. What about the all-in-ones? You want to talk a bit about the all-in-one thin client stations that you guys have?
Sure. So we've taken that thin client intelligence and we've integrated into our business class displays. We have 22 and 24-inch monitors, and these are truly business class in that these are not typical consumer devices. So, for example, they have built-in stereo speakers. They have height adjustable stands, tilt, pivot, swivel adjustments. They also have 6 USB ports, 2 USB 3 ports. So it's truly a business class in that you can connect just about any type of accessory to it, video cams, anything you could imagine you can plug into it. You can even charge your phone while you're working. But it has the thin client intelligence built in. So the monitor itself doesn't look any different than, say, a 450 series Samsung monitor. But it does have an Ethernet port, connects to a network, and allows you to connect into a Citrix, Amazon, VMware environment, Microsoft, you name it. So it has all of those software components built in so that it's basically a cloud-ready monitor. So as soon as you log in, you can connect to your Citrix server. In fact, you can even, with the management tools that IGEL offers, you can have it pre-configured before the device is even used for the first time.
We're going to talk about management in a second. We'll get to that. So, I find it's one of the cool things I think about, or I know about with the all-in-ones is if a user already has a second monitor, they can do something cool with that. Can you share that?
Sure. So, customers that already have a monitor, they can still put that monitor to use because that monitor can be connected to the Samsung all-in-one, and now you have dual display. So this way, you don't have to throw away your existing monitors. You can continue to use them because all of the Samsung thin client displays, they all have a secondary output to drive another monitor. So now you can span that desktop across 2 screens, and that will increase user productivity. And one of the interesting things that we found in one of the studies we did was it not only increased user productivity, it increased user satisfaction. People like when their work is easy to access. And the more real estate you have on your screens, then the easier that is. So this way you can still use your existing monitors, but you can actually increase productivity by connecting that to a cloud display from Samsung.
Very cool. Very cool. I love it. I love that aspect of it. I want one of these things, by the way. So I really do. So where does the IGEL fit in? You mentioned IGEL a few times. So can you talk about how IGEL fits into the Samsung story, thin client story? Sure.
So one of the reasons why we chose IGEL as a partner is because, I think our strengths complement one another. So Samsung, we make our own glass, and we make about 90% of all the components in our business devices we actually make. And that goes down to the printed circuit board, the resistors and capacitors that are on that board. We make 90% of those components. So with that, we're able to bring things to market much faster than many other manufacturers, and we can also bring them to market at a very good price because we're cutting out the middleman. But what we really needed was an operating system that was robust and could connect to all of the different cloud environments. Because before we partnered with IGEL, we had a lot of success with zero clients. And zero clients are more purpose-built devices, but zero clients are limited in the type of connectivity that they can support. For example, our zero clients, they only connect to VMware environments, Amazon, so that limits your connectivity. So if we had a customer that was using Citrix, for example, we really couldn't address their needs. So we needed an operating system that would give us more connectivity. And when we looked into it, the reason why we chose IGEL was because they had more than just an OS. IGEL had an ecosystem of tools that allow you to automate your thin client environment. Because the whole concept behind a thin client is you want to simplify the desktop. And if you have if all you have is an operating system that allows you to do that, you still have to configure it, at least for the first time, and you may have to update it from time to time. If you upgrade your Citrix server, for example, you may need to upgrade your Citrix software that's running on that thin client. And that, in some ways, defeats the purpose of a thin client, because now it's still a device that has to be managed. However, IGEL has a whole ecosystem of tools that allow you to automate that process, so that now you can have profiles, pre-configured profiles that can be applied to devices, and they can be inherited as those devices join the network. So this way, the IT administrator doesn't ever have to touch the desktop. He can, once he sets things up initially, it pretty much runs on autopilot. And when they need to do an update, the IGEL UMS management tool allows them to go out and retrieve that update and apply it to the devices they want. But the administrator doesn't really even have to be all that smart or crafty about how he rolls that update out. In fact, he can simply automate the whole process, so that the management tool, he can schedule that update to happen at off-peak hours, and the management tool does the automatic update, and the IT administrator can go home. And the next day, everyone has that new update.
You have I remember chatting with you not long ago, and you had a great name for this automation for the management. You didn't call it management, you called it something automation. Do you remember that?
Well, I've always preferred the term automation tool, because I know IGEL calls it a UMS, Universal Management System, but I don't like the term management, because management implies that the IT administrator has to do work. And that's exactly the opposite of what the IGEL UMS tool does. It actually eliminates work for him, because it automates many of the tasks that you'd have to do to manage a thin client. I mean, the other thing too, you have to kind of take a step back and remember, we're talking about a thin client. It doesn't require much maintenance at all. It rarely requires updates. So therefore, you don't want to have to learn a tool that you're only going to use maybe once every 6 to 18 months. You're going to forget how to use it. So why not have a tool that's very easy to use, intuitive, when once you set everything up, then you barely have to touch it. Yeah. So that way it just automates the whole process and makes the whole process easy, and you don't have to, there's not much to relearn. When you upgrade your Citrix server, and you haven't touched the tool in 18 months, you shouldn't have to relearn a whole new environment. And the console with UMS is very easy to use, very intuitive. If you're smart, you really don't even need to use the user manual. It's easy enough for me to use, and I'm certainly not an expert. I'm not an engineer. But not only is it easy to use, but once you set it up, it's pretty much puts you on autopilot.
Yeah. I like how you describe that. I really do, because it is automation. You set it up and you let it do its thing. And we have customers with 10,000 devices plus out there. Tens of thousands of devices that have, one or two guys for fault tolerance reasons, the second person. And they set it up, and then it does its job, right? The user, the engineer, or the admin doesn't have to do the job. The software does the job. And that's automation. I love how you explain that. So here's another one to explain. This is a question I had to ask, or I've asked many times, because I always get confused. I should know this. I do now, but I like the way you explain it. What's the difference between a zero client and a thin client?
Sure. So a zero client, I like to think of as more as a purpose-built device. And most zero clients out there today use a Teradici chipset which has the PC over IP protocol technology built into it. Basically, what a zero client is a decoder, but it's usually a single protocol device. In fact, I don't know of any true zero clients that support more than one protocol. When I say protocol, think of that as just the language that the device uses to speak to the server. So with a zero client, with most zero clients, I should say, that protocol intelligence is integrated into a chipset. So the advantage is you really don't have a full operating system. You do need a GUI. You need a graphical interface. So there is a small software layer that does run in Flash, similar to a thin client, but it's much smaller than a thin client. In fact, it's smaller than your average BIOS on a PC. So the advantage is there's less updates and a smaller attack surface. The disadvantage is it kind of is what it is. Because everything is baked into the hardware, you really can't change it. It's limited as to what type of updates you can do. So that's where a thin client comes in. A thin client gives you more flexibility because it has an operating system. But you don't lose that premium security because the operating system is so small on a thin client that it has a very small attack surface, but it's also a locked file system. So in other words, it's not writable. You can't just write to the flash. And so you don't really lose a whole lot of security with a thin client. It seems to be just as secure, but much more flexible in that you can update the Citrix or the View or the PC over IP client. You can add components if you need to. In fact, I believe IGEL even has a writable partition where if you had to add a device drivers for a local device, you could do so in a writable partition that's completely isolated from the core OS. So the core OS is always protected, but now you have the flexibility of connecting to just about any type of cloud environment that you could possibly imagine. So it gives you much more investment protection and it future-proofs your device. Because now, let's say you're a company that uses VMware, but you merge with a company that uses Citrix. Well, with a thin client, you can still use that same device to connect into both environments. Whereas with a zero client, you're really limited. You would basically have to replace all those zero clients with thin clients. So they both have their place in the world. But I think the thin client addresses much more use cases than a zero client.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that everything has its place. Nobody's saying definitely, IGEL or Samsung or anybody out there, anybody worth their, weight, is saying that there's something called all inclusive or, one solution for everything. There's not. Everybody, there's different use cases. You got to find the right use case, but the world's changing, and more so today. These thin clients or secure endpoints or access clients make even more sense than they ever have, and they're only going to continue as the world continues to move into the cloud and into these remote solutions, which are just a better way to compute, in my opinion. So, can I ask about price? So, how do you guys price the Samsung IGEL solutions?
So the Samsung IGEL solution starts out at about $349 for the 22-inch and $379 for the 24-inch, which is kind of amazing because now you're at the price of a standalone thin client, just about. So you're almost getting the monitor for free. And the way we're able to do that is with our manufacturing capabilities with glass and electronic components. But there's also a version that has an IGEL part number that you can buy, which also has the new Linux 10 version of the IGEL Linux OS. I don't know the pricing of those off the top of my head. They cost a little bit more money because you're getting the newer operating system with more software components. In fact, I believe that's the one with the writable partition. So you get some additional support. You get smart card support, things like that, some extras in there. I don't know the pricing of that offhand, but that's an IGEL part number that's available through the same channel partners that Samsung sells through.
Don't ask me pricing. I don't know what anything costs. So luckily, if I'm lucky, somebody sends me something and I get to play with it. So, but I don't sell it. I just evangelize it, right? So I find good stuff and I share it with others. So that's my life.
The good news is that there's a couple of versions out there, but the starting price is $349. So it's a very attractive price considering the fact that you're getting a business class display that will also make use of your existing displays because it can connect right into another monitor.
Yeah, the all-in-ones are really beautiful devices. I've seen them numerous times, right? Doing what I do. They're nice devices, really beautiful devices. I mean, come on, Samsung doesn't make anything but really, really nice equipment. Okay, so we've talked about zero clients, thin clients. We haven't talked about repurposing PCs, although we can do that too, right? We talked about automation, which is quite cool. I love the way you describe this as an automation solution, which I so agree with. Where do you see? So I have to ask you about the future, right? Where do you see all this stuff going? Where do you see the future of this style of technology?
So I think there's a lot of new interesting devices coming out that are going to address cast a much wider net on use cases. So, for example, Samsung has a new DeX solution, which works with our Galaxy phones. It also works with the new Note 8. And basically what DeX Station is, it's a device that basically a cradle for your phone or your Note that you can, once you connect it, the phone or the Note actually converts the interface to a PC-like desktop. And it connects the mobile device to a full-size monitor, keyboard, and mouse. So it's a pretty interesting solution. It's not just a docking station. It's actually a software solution that integrates your cloud environment with your phone environment. And I think that could be interesting for mobile users, for executives that are on the road, salespeople, people that travel a lot or they're moving from room to room, roaming type users. I think it addresses an interesting use case for them because now they can start thinking about, well, do I really need this laptop anymore? Because I can now have my work environment in the cloud and I can access it from my phone or my Note. And if I want to be productive, I can just dock it into the DeX station. And now I get a full PC style desktop where I can connect to the cloud. And I can also integrate my cloud environment with my phone environment. So for example, if I get a text message while I'm working on an Excel spreadsheet, I get a little pop-up and I click on the text message, I answer it, and then I minimize that screen, go back to my spreadsheet. I never had to take my eyes off of the screen, and I don't need an extra device. So it integrates my phone environment and my personal applications with my cloud environment. So I think that's a pretty interesting solution for roaming users. And then you also have the Chromebooks, which I think are really good for if you're looking for an inexpensive device. You can connect to the cloud with a Chromebook. So I think that's also an interesting device for, say, a student population in a K through 12 school or something like that. But I think where thin clients fit is anywhere where you need a stationary device, whether it be your home office or your cubicle at work, or a kiosk, or a nursing station, or a mobile cart, anywhere where you have a device that's permanently connected and permanently attached I think that's where thin clients will have their place in the world. So I think what you're going to see is you're going to see people starting to rethink the desktop and rethink whether they need that laptop that has a full Windows desktop. And because now there's some new interesting alternatives such as the DeX solution, Chromebooks, and thin clients. So I think those are things that offer people some really interesting alternatives.
I'm so glad that you brought up the DeX, because I just think I think that's amazing, right? It's first of all, when I first saw it, it reminded me of Chris Flex, Citrix's Chris Flex Nirvana phone, where you plug the phone in and the phone turns into a fully working computer, right? And
Sure.
And that's definitely the way the future is going. And then Samsung, came out with this DeX, and at what was this Synergy? You took me to the side and said, "Doug, let me show you one." I was like, "Oh, great! I haven't seen it yet. I'm only in videos and what have you." Right? I was amazed by this device. Can you talk more about this, or what else can you share with us? I mean, you explained it. There's not much to it. You plug it in, it turns it into a PC, and it really works, right?
Well, I think
to share there.
Sure, I think Samsung did a fantastic job of integrating your mobile environment into a desktop-like environment. You can find some screenshots on our website, but what you'll notice is, for example, if you click on your LinkedIn app on your phone, that's going to show up as a desktop icon when you're connected to a full screen monitor. And when you click on that, you now get right-click functionality. You get window sizing. And you also get pop-up notifications as well. So, for example, if you get a LinkedIn message while you're inside your Citrix session, you'll see that pop up. Even though you're connected to a Citrix environment, you'll still see that pop up, and you can bring up that app. So it really integrates your personal environment with your corporate environment, and it also with the Knox software. The Knox software keeps everything containerized so that your corporate data and your personal data is still personal, and your corporate data is still fully secured and protected, because the two are firewalled. So the Knox keeps you protected, but the DeX still allows you to toggle between the two environments without ever having to take your eyes off of the screen. So I think this has got to be probably one of the best, if not the best, 1.0 versions of software that I've ever seen in my life, because the integration has been done so tastefully, and it's extremely robust. I mean, things work exactly how you would expect them to work on a PC. So your mouse and your keyboard, all of that functionality is already there. And this is 1.0, which it just truly amazes me.
Yeah, I'm amazed by it too, and every time I see a video of it or in person, I'm always quite impressed. And I think it's the future, although maybe the future is definitely we don't even need a device, wireless charging, blah, blah, blah. Just bring the phone close and it'll just appear on a screen, right? But,
sure.
There's going to be, we're going to have a little cradle there for a while, if not, a longer while. But it's really impressive. If you guys haven't seen it, definitely check it out, because you'll be quite as blown away as both Greg and I are by it. So what else do I say there? It's neat technology that you guys are creating. So I can't wait to follow that in more detail. Greg, that's basically into the questions I'd written down. I mean, we've gone off script for most of the podcast, but is there anything I've left out? Anything else you'd like to chat about?
So you mentioned earlier PC conversions, and I wanted to touch on that a little bit, because one of the things that I find pretty impressive is part of the ecosystem of products that IGEL has is they do have a conversion tool for PCs. It's called UDC, and what that allows customers to do is, if they're not quite ready, or their refresh cycle for their PCs hasn't come around yet, there's a very affordable way using UDC to convert that device into a thin client. It would be a managed thin client that would connect right into the IGEL UMS management tool. so that you can automate all of your IT tasks just like you would a thin client. But the other interesting thing is the UD Pocket, which is basically a portable thin client. And where I think that's extremely unique is there's been many other companies have had portable USB thin clients. And from a hardware standpoint, this is no different. But what makes it unique is that IGEL solved the problem of how do you manage that device? If that device requires an update or a configuration change, how do you do that? And especially when it's not always connected. It could be on a keychain, it might be sitting in someone's desk, and you never know when they're going to use it. And IGEL solved that problem with their gateway service. Their gateway service basically becomes a repository for any updates or configuration changes that need to be rolled out. And when the device connects, that gateway can find the device, it can update it, which, again, that automates the process. The IT administrator doesn't have to do this manually. This happens automatically. It also gets you behind firewalls and NATed environments, so you can basically manage any device from any location. And I think that's what makes this portable thin client something that's more enterprise class. It's more usable for business because now it can be managed by your IT staff.
Greg, I'm so glad you brought that up because, from the UDC side, the device conversion is definitely neat. So useful. It's incredible because you can take an existing piece of hardware and make it better without buying new, right? And that right there is just awesome. But the UD Pocket is definitely an interesting piece of software, piece of hardware / software, right? It's really software that's just stuck on a USB stick. There's nothing fancy about a USB stick. They've been around for 20 years, or darn close. But the fact that you can roam that thing around and stick it into an existing, piece of almost pretty much any x86 64-bit hardware is really powerful. And you see IGEL's getting a lot of play on that and a lot of success. And people, every time I hand them out, people just absolutely love it. It's what do I say that you didn't, right? I think it's just huge. And then of course the cloud gateway to me it reminds me of Citrix Secure Gateway, because Citrix Secure Gateway really, if for those who remember that technology, it took Citrix to the any, and now you can go really anywhere and not worry about firewalls, right? And it's the same exact story where now you can take, because of the UD Pocket, because of that solution, now we have a mobile thin client, right? A truly mobile thin client thing we can plug in almost any device, as we said, and then securely connect into the back, or securely be managed through the back end anywhere, any place, anytime. And those two pieces together, it's powerful, right? And it plays into everything I think we've talked about throughout this podcast, is the changing world of no longer we sitting in front of our device, it being required to be a one-to-one relationship. But now we're getting our software from, our applications from different places, different owners, some owned by us personally, some owned by IT, and some is owned by, different providers that we subscribe to in the, as a service model. And I just really love it. I have one sitting right in front of me. I'm holding it right now. It's so tiny. Sometimes I lose the thing. I have to look for it. But I have another one on my keychain that I never forget because it's on my keychain. But I'm glad you brought that up, because it is just, those solutions are just so powerful. And it also just shows the changing world of what we're doing and how we can take this software and put it on anything, right? Be it a Mac, a PC, and repurposing, put it on a traditional piece of hardware for those who might, benefit from that, right? Put it on a Samsung all-in-one device, a great piece of hardware that you guys have created. And take the best of breed operating system and management solution and make that better, or stick it on a USB stick and then take it anywhere, anyplace, anytime. To me, that's a 360 solution, right? And then automate the management. So just simple as you described. That right there is pretty powerful.
Yeah, and that goes back to the phrase I used earlier is, we didn't choose IGEL because they had an OS. We chose IGEL because they have an ecosystem of tools, and all of these tools, all of these endpoint solutions that they have, they're all managed, and that's what's unique. Other companies have come out with USB portable thin clients, but the problem was they weren't managed, and that's the difference. And the same with UDC. There have been other companies that have come out with PC repurposing tools, but they're not managed like a thin client, and they're not able to be managed in such a broad way, the way IGEL's been able to pull all of those pieces together.
And when you say managed too, it's the competition has management. They definitely have management, but they don't have the management the way the IGEL solution does, and it's really night and day. And I tell you, I'm still amazed. I mean, I've been with the company almost a year now, and every time I see one of the engineers do a demo of it, I'm like, God, we can do this. And because there's so much you can show, there's so many different possibilities, right? Because you're taking a custom built operating system that's designed for Citrix, for remoting, right? Citrix, Microsoft, VMware, Amazon, and you can tear it down to to a kiosk, right? Or you can build it up into where you have you mentioned a custom partition where you can actually deploy different applications within that operating system and manage those, right? It's just it's you can do anything with it. So these engineers, they have the benefit of knowing it inside out, and everyone demos it a little bit different way. And every time I'm amazed. It's I thought I understood what IGEL did when I came to the company, and I don't think there's a day that goes by that I'm not like, wow, we do this too. And that's a testament to the developers and the product managers and the management team that have really methodically built out a great solution that's as valuable today as it has ever been, and continuing to grow into the future as we move into this subscription economy that, whether you like it or not, we're going towards, right?
Well, my experience was a little bit different, but just as powerful. I've been competing with IGEL for most of my career, so. Poor guy. And it's been tough because the one thing that's always been a thorn in our side when I was working for competitors was the fact that the management tool was so robust and it was so ahead of its time. IGEL was always at least a generation ahead of everyone else in the management and what I like to call automation space. And one of my first experiences with IGEL, when we first created our alliance together, we had a training session with one of your engineers, and it was amazing because here I was. I've been in this business since 1998, and I've seen all the management tools, and here I was being trained, and I'm seeing some features that I remember we were trying to create, and we just couldn't seem to make it work. And here it was, they were showing me, hey, yeah, we have this, and it works. And it was really impressive. So
do you remember the feature?
There were lots of, well, for example, like the UDC it works with most x86 processors. Now, I've worked with other products that had what they call client builder. Because you have to, in order to work with most x86 devices, you have to be able to figure out what drivers you need, hardware device drivers you need. And with other tools that I've worked with in the past, I think the best we ever got to was maybe 30% of the devices that we tried to support, we could actually make work.
Well, I did. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Whereas the IGEL client builder, I'm not sure if that's the correct term. I forget, but they have something similar to that client builder, and it just works. I don't think it guarantees it's going to work on every x86 because x86 has been around a long time, but it's pretty solid. I mean, it's rare that you find a device where it's not going to work. It's extremely rare. So. Any modern x86 environment, you can be pretty confident it's most likely going to work every time. And that was a real challenge in the past, and it's amazing to see that IGEL figured that out. They solved that problem, and that was a problem that other companies just couldn't solve.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the IGEL it's an operating system. It's not a piece of, it's not a device converter, it's not like, hey, let's put a little, it's an operating system by the finest sense of the word, right? And it uses the Ubuntu kernel, which gives us massive driver support because we can use all the Ubuntu drivers. So, if there's something we don't support, well, you know what? That's great because now we can go find the right driver, include it into the firmware, and off it goes in the next revision, right? So, and then being a mature, being that it's been around for quite some time, it's, it does support basically anything that Ubuntu supports, which is a lot of devices because, again, it's an operating system. It's not just something that a couple guys wrote in a garage because they wanted to convert their PCs into thin clients, which is basically what we've seen seen out of a lot of these device converters out there. Not selling these guys shorts. I know a lot of these guys and what they built is quite impressive. But they didn't build an operating system, and that's the difference. Hey, Greg, you know what? We can chat all day long. We're right about an hour. In fact, we just flipped an hour on my little clock thingy here. So let's go ahead and conclude this thing and call it an episode. What do you think?
Sounds good. So, this was fun.
I've enjoyed it. We've talked for I think 3 hours. I think something like that together. No, 2 hours. 2 hours. We've talked for 2 hours. You and I are 2 hours and 15 minutes. So 2 hours and 20 minutes. Anyway, I thoroughly enjoy it. I enjoyed it so much. I've had such a great afternoon. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your insights on the thin client market, sharing what Samsung is doing. I look forward to seeing you at Summit if you make it to Summit. Synergy, you're usually there. The other events, and of course the IGEL Disrupt if you make that, our end user conference we're putting on next year, 2018, which is a couple weeks away. How did what happened in 2017? Can you answer that question?
What happened to 2017?
Yeah, where'd it go? It seems like yesterday was January.
Yeah, it's true. Wow, it's just December already. It's amazing.
Believe it. Oh my Lord! Before long, I'm gonna be dead. I gotta watch myself. We gotta slow down time.
Yeah.
So you guys working on that over at Samsung?
Yeah, I hope so. I hope somebody's working on that somewhere.
Isn't that what's that TV show? The Big Bang Theory, where they're like, is somebody working on that?
Yeah,
I think someone's working on that.
Yeah.
We need someone working on slowing down time, just for us old folks.
We do.
But it's been. I wouldn't want to. I'd want to enjoy all this stuff just a bit longer. It's been the best 20 years of my life. I'll tell you that much. Okay, my friend, you take care, and I'll chat with you another day.
All right, you too. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Okay, that concludes another successful episode of DABCC Radio. As always, I want to thank my guest for today, Greg Spence from Samsung. And we've been trying to do this. Actually, we recorded it in the story. This is an interesting story. We recorded the podcast in, I don't know, just before VMworld, something like that. And I had just had a root canal. And the night before. So we went to record this podcast, and I was in so much pain that I sounded more of an idiot than I usually do. It was really bad. And Greg had nobody to play off of, and it just didn't come out that great. And I know Greg as just to be such a brilliant guy, and in that we could have so much, such a fun conversation. So I wanted to re-record it, and trying to get our schedules synced was difficult. So we finally did it, and I'm excited to share this with you because not only is Greg a great guy, but what Samsung is doing is quite neat, and that DeX is just amazing. So I'm really, I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. I definitely did, and thank you so much, Greg, for taking the time to do this with us, and Samsung for allowing him to do this, and IGEL for introducing me to Greg. We chatted for about an hour and a half prior to the podcast. So just chatting about everything and then some. It was just a great time. Really great guy. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you ever get a chance to meet him at Summit or Synergy or any of the conferences, definitely do. Really, really neat guy. Very smart. So on that note, thank you, Greg, so much for taking the time to do this with us. And of course, thanks to each and every one of you guys for listening to DABCC. If you're interested in IT news, head over to www.dabcc.com for the latest and greatest IT news. Need I say more? It should be a site that you visit often. We also have a mobile app too, so head to use our mobile app, and it's a great way to stay up to date with what's going on, just from from your iPhone. So we have a podcast app too, both at Google for Android users and iPhone app. So head on over to the App Store as your favorite to download that. And with no further ado, let's just call this an episode. Again, thank you so much for listening to the ABCC Radio.
Can you say DABCC?
DABC.
Say it again, DABCC.
DABC.
Can you say it again, DABCC?
DABC.
How about DABCC?
DABC.
DABCC.
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 DABCC.